Melanie heaved a sigh of relief as the rush at the restaurant began to subside. Her feet ached in her black shoes, and her lower back complained from hours of standing while attending to all the customers. Even her cheeks now hurt from wearing the signature smile she had worn since the start of her shift at 7 a.m. At this point, more than anything, she couldn't wait to go home, but she still had a few hours to go. She heaved a sigh of relief, tucked a hairlock behind her ears, and mindlessly began refilling salt shakers at the Waitress station. Her mind raced back to when she was still working in the administration firm, with a car and an apartment to her name. Life was indeed good in those times, but then she lost her job with the firm. It became quite hard for her to make ends meet, so she thought of a way to make herself useful. She resorted to working as a waitress in one of the city's most prominent restaurants, but lost her spark, seeing how she was not happy serving food to self-absorbed rich people. She was still thinking about how miserable her life had gotten when suddenly she heard, "Mel, I need you to serve table 14. She turned to see her manager looking at her with a look that said, "Is everything all right with you?" She quickly snapped out of all her fantasies. "But I am supposed to be off section now," she protested weakly. Table 14 was in the private corner of the restaurant reserved for VIPs and those willing to pay to have their privacy. It required extra attention, impeccable service, and flawless presentation. Melanie hated being sent to that table section, as it often required her to deal with entitled customers who expected the sun and moon to be served on a golden platter. "I know, and I am sorry, but they just seated someone important, and I need my best server on it." Her tone made it clear it was not a request. Melanie nodded reluctantly. She needed this job and the generous tips that came with it, but she couldn't be found slacking off on it. Melanie could tell it was someone from the administration. Emma, her manager, told her to be professional, not political, and serve them like everyone else. She took her notepad and walked to table 14 with practiced poise. She got to the table and immediately recognized the person seated, as he had occasionally graced magazine covers and news segments. Donald Trump's youngest son. Any worker would die to serve him, knowing the tip that would follow their service. "I guess I got lucky," Melanie thought to herself. She took his order and got a note instead of a tip when she came to take his bill. On opening the note, Melanie immediately burst into uncontrollable tears. Her co-workers rushed down to her, all confused and surprised. What could have been written in the note? Could this be the end of her job? Not again, especially in this tough economy. Melanie once thought she had made it. At 24, she worked as a consultant manager at a prestigious administrative firm in Ohio, earning a much more stable income with large benefits. She had a sleek company car, a spacious apartment near Central Park, and, most importantly, a promising career ahead of her. She felt like the years of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice were finally paying off, and she was fulfilled and happy. Melanie's job was the type that people would give up everything they had for. It was fast-paced, high, and full of opportunities for advancement. They are known for handling corporate clients and high-profile business strategies. Melanie was not just a consultant, but also an executive assistant to one of the senior partners, which was very demanding but rewarding. She coordinated meetings, managed high-stakes documents, and handled communications for top-level clients. She thrived in a structured environment, where her attention to detail and quick problem-solving skills made her stand out. She was admired and respected by her colleagues. Melanie loved her job because it granted her access to exclusive networking events, making her stand next to elite business professionals. She wore tailored suits, carried an expensive leather planner, and was opportune to drink high-priced coffee from the cafe where the CEOs held breakfast meetings. Everything about her life felt polished, structured, and successful. She was where she was meant to be until strategy struck. One morning, while Melanie was at work, attending to some clients, her phone rang. When she picked up her phone, there was a call from the hospital saying her mom was rushed into the hospital and needed a blood transfusion as soon as possible. Melanie was confused. She did not know how to take the news she had just received. She knew she could not go off work because the clients she was attending to were big investors. She bent her head and said a few prayers as she proceeded with the meeting. After she got off work, she immediately rushed down to the hospital to see her mom lying almost lifeless on the bed. Melanie's heart broke, and tears streamed down her eyes. She could not understand how her mom had gotten so sick. When she got to the hospital, her mom was asleep. She sat beside her bed, quietly waiting for her to wake up. She tried not to panic, but she could not help herself. Her mother was the only family she knew, and she could not bear to lose her. Melanie was raised by her single mother, and even while growing up, she never saw anyone come to their house to visit. She concluded that that her mom has no friends or relations, but whenever she tried to ask her mom, she saw the sad look it brought to her eyes, and she decided never to bring it up or talk about it again. She loved her mom, and they lived together happily until she was done with college and got this job. She had to move from her mom's house to the apartment in the company quarter. She requested that her mom come live with her, but she declined, saying that her house held so many memories she didn't want to fade away by moving out. Melanie had no choice but to leave after her mother convinced her she would be fine and promised to see her weekly. She has been faithful to her promise, but Melanie was so busy with work that she never observed that her mom had been sick all this time. Looking down at her now as she lay on the hospital bed, she could see the wrinkles and how much weight she had lost. Melanie was heartbroken and couldn't stop crying. She blamed herself for allowing her mom to go through whatever was wrong with her alone. She was still crying when her mom finally woke up. She turned to see her mom looking at her. She tried to talk, but she was too weak. Melanie held her hands and told her not to try talking and that she would go and get the doctor. The doctor came and examined her. She told Melanie that they had to find a blood donor as soon as possible so that they could start the process and proceed with the required treatments. Melanie was tested, but she was not a match. Now the real struggle begins. Where would she find a match for her mom, and how would she begin her search? Can she juggle the hospital visits and her very tasking job? All these thoughts made her head spin. She felt helpless. She knew very well that any form of slacking at her job would mean getting fired, and she didn't want to risk it. After making the necessary arrangements, she left the hospital to go to her house. At home, Melanie couldn't stop thinking about her mom. She didn't want to lose her mom because she knew it would break her beyond words. She prayed so much that night, begging God to connect her to anything to help the situation. She hated herself for not even being a match for her mother. What kind of daughter she was, she thought painfully. She fell asleep while thinking and bugging her head about her pitiful state. The following day, there she was, sitting again in another meeting. She tried her best to concentrate fully on her work, but her mind couldn't help but wander. She stuttered when asked questions. She responded mindlessly when asked a question. She flopped at her presentation, and everyone she attended to that day left the office angrily. Her boss soon called her in. He explained that he noticed an abnormality with her, and that whatever the issue, she should try not to allow her personal life to interfere with her work. Melanie's heart was burning with rage. What kind of people are these? She thought silently to herself. She had always been perfect at her job, and just one day of being distracted, they did not even care enough to ask what the matter could be. Well, it's not like they ever really cared about her. She was just an asset while it lasted, and if she isn't doing what they hired her for, what else would they need her for? Nothing, she concluded, calming herself down. Melanie tried to brush off her bad feelings about her mom. She reassured herself that everything was okay and that her mother would eventually be fine. But deep down, she had an uneasy feeling she couldn't shake off. 2 weeks later, her mom slipped into a coma. They ran another test and called Melanie over to the hospital. She figured something worse could have happened, and when she got there, the doctor confirmed her fears. Her mother has pancreatic cancer, and it is at the last stage. The doctor explained to her that this sickness had no cure, and all she could do was be on treatment until she died. The drugs needed to sustain her were so expensive that it took virtually all of Melanie's savings, although she didn't care and just prayed her mother would get better. But every day seems to be worse. Her mother's condition kept deteriorating, and even the doctors were scared that she may have only a few weeks to live. Melanie's world shifted overnight. She completely lost her cool. Her work meetings suddenly seemed trivial. Reports and emails blurred together as her mind was constantly elsewhere, thinking about chemotherapy appointments, medical appointments, and the gut-wrenching reality that her mother might not have much time left in this world. She started skipping work to have enough time to be with her mother. She wanted to stay by her side in her last moments. She would leave meetings to attend to the doctor's calls, miss deadlines, and lose track of important documents. She had a workload of tasks that urgently needed her attention, of which she had none to give as her mind was constantly thinking about her mother. She made so many mistakes she would never have made before. Everyone could see how much she was slacking off work, and they felt sorry for her, but feeling sorry was not enough to save her job. She knew sooner or later that she would likely lose her job because of her recent performance, but all she cared about at that moment was how she would be with her mother. Melanie was slowly getting into depression. She cried herself to sleep every night, and on most days she would sleep over at the hospital. She felt like life was being unfair to her. She would sit staring into the blank wall of the hospital, questioning God. She could not understand why the only person she had in the world had to go like that. The more she thinks about it, the more betrayed she feels by God. Melanie's boss initially understood, or rather, pretended to be. Family comes first, so take care of what you must do, he told her. But as as weeks passed, his patience was beginning to wear off. She forgot to schedule an important client meeting, causing tension between executives. This caused an uproar in the office, and when Melanie was summoned, she didn't even have the right words to defend herself. The whispers in the office started in earnest after that incident. Her colleagues were beginning to place bets on whether or not she would make it for another month in the office. She used to be at the top of everything, but she couldn't help but slip off after her mom got admitted into the hospital. Time went off, and Melina slipped further, even after collecting a warning letter. She got summoned to the HR's office, and immediately she entered. The manager started. "We're truly sorry for what you've been going through lately. We understand this has been a difficult time for you." She looked at Melanie to ensure she understood what she was getting to. "Given the circumstances," she continued, "we understand why, but unfortunately, we need someone fully dedicated to the role you occupy." She took the warning letter from her drawer and handed it to Melanie. Melanie collected the letter. She felt the air leave her lungs. "If you don't sit up, we would have to let you go," her manager said passively. Melanie had long seen this coming. She nodded and turned to leave with tears-filled eyes. She got to her desk and cried so much. While she was still expressing those emotions, she got a call from the hospital saying that her mother had just passed away. At that instant, Melanie almost passed out. She had so much hope that she would get better. She would fight and come out strong, but fate had written its own story. She took off to the hospital and watched as they cremated her mother's body. That's when reality dawned on her that her mother was gone for good. She could no longer hold it in and let all hell loose. The doctors had to take her to the private ward till she could calm down. After she was done crying, she left the hospital and started to make burial arrangements. She was the only relative she knew of her mother. She registered at a cemetery and buried her mother there. After the burial, Melanie lost all will to live. She resorted to drinking alcohol to stop herself from thinking, and slowly she was becoming a mess. She took pills to sleep, and her house was in a wreck, but Melanie was anything but bothered. The weekend quickly ended, and she had to resume work on Monday. She got to the office and was told she had been relieved of her job. "We are sorry," her boss began. He couldn't see her eye and knew she had given her all and best to the company before the incident with her mother. "We have to let you go, Melanie. Your replacement is here already." The words hit her like a slap. "I just lost my mother," she stammered. "How can you do this to me? I need a little more time to get back on track. You can't relieve me." She hated that she sounded desperate, but more than anything, she couldn't afford to lose her job now. "We are offering you a severance package with 3 months' pay. We hope this gives you enough time to find something new." A severance package? Am I being paid to disappear? She thought to herself. She looked around and could tell by everyone's expression that this was a lost battle. She left to pack her things from her desk and out of the organization, never to return. 3 months' pay would do nothing for her, she thought. She has rent and outstanding medical bills to clear, and no backup plan. She was no longer a part of the eco-administration. She had to deal with that and stop her self-pity. But how? Where does she start? She has no one in particular. She was still drowning in all these thoughts when her phone rang. She looked to see her old-time college friend calling. She was surprised because they hadn't spoken in over 10 years. She picked up the call, and after exchanging pleasantries, she told her about a job offer at a restaurant in town. She mentioned the pay, and although it wasn't what Melanie was used to, she figured she could stick with that for now. She told Rowdy, her college friend, that she was interested in the job offer and would like to apply. The application process went through, and Melanie was invited for an interview. Melanie had never imagined that she would be sitting in front of a restaurant manager, nervously taking interview questions for a waitress position. During the interview, the manager could tell she had zero experience, but he could also see her determination to learn. He studied her for a while and asked her to go in through the back, where she would be given her uniform and could resume working the next day. Her first shift was a disaster. She had underestimated how physically demanding the job was. Carrying trays, running between tables, and memorizing orders while maintaining a polite demeanor was all too exhausting. By the end of the night, her feet ached, her apron got torn, and she nearly dropped a $200 wine in front of a VIP customer. But over time, she got better. Her training from her previous job helped her adjust to the new system she was in. She learned to balance trays, anticipate customers' needs, and handle difficult patrons without losing her temper. When her shift was behind the reception desk, she would receive customers and smile at them, trying to give off a friendly aura to make them feel comfortable. All her colleagues could now see how good she had become. They admired her for being so dedicated and committed to her work. But Melanie was trying to see how she could meet up with all her financial targets. Nothing was exciting for her regarding being a waitress, but she knew she had no choice as it was the only job she could get. Finally, luck was about to shine on Melanie, but little did she know she would get lucky on this day. Her manager had asked her to serve table 14 because a prestigious person had come in. Melanie was supposed to be preparing to leave work, but agreed to return and take the order. She got to the table and requested to take the gentleman's order. He raised his head from the email he was reading, and when he saw his attendant, he gave a queer expression as if to say, "I know this face." Melanie saw it, but waved it off. She took his order and left. After she was done serving him, she came to take his bill, and while she was there, she noticed he had left a note with the check. She wasn't sure if she was supposed to open the note, but curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it. It read, "I don't know how you became a waitress at a restaurant, but whatever the case might be, would you want your job back, but at a more convenient place? How about becoming my secretary? Whatever your decision, give me a call." Melanie was confused. Become the secretary to Barron Trump? Is she dreaming? And just then, while she stood looking down at the note, tears flowed down her cheeks. She needed an explanation. Later that night, when she got home, she called the number on the note, and when the person on the other line picked up, it was Barron. She had thought maybe it was a sort of prank and that it wasn't his number. She asked him about the note, and he told her how he had often come to the eco-administration for consultations and had always seen her work so earnestly. He had secretly admired her zeal and attitude towards her work. Then, he further explained how he had been going over to the administration for some time, but stopped seeing her at work. When he inquired, he was told she had lost her mom, which made her slack from her work duties, leaving the administration with no choice but to relieve her. He apologized for her mom's death and asked her what she thought concerning his offer. Melanie was crying profusely by this time, and she couldn't stop herself. Barron completely understood her as he knew this thing could get overwhelming. After she found space to talk, she agreed to accept Barron's offer, and he unfailingly asked her to come by his office the next day. He hung up, and Melanie was left alone with her thoughts. How could her situation change overnight? Indeed, God had not forgotten her, she thought. What happened to Melanie is what most people would call a miracle. What do you think about the turnout of Melanie's struggles? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Before you go, click the links on your screen for more insightful videos. You can also tap the bell icon to get a notification when we post a new one. See you next time.